On the evening of Friday the 17th of January 2014, Daniel Spargo Mabs persuaded his mum to let him go to a party with a group of friends. As Dan was usually responsible, his mum Fiona agreed that he could go. Dan and his friends went to an illegal rave in Hillingdon instead of the party. It was the first time he'd been to a rave. At the rave, Dan took MDMA along with 4 of the others. He had no way of knowing that there was a lethal amount of MDMA in the bag he had. At 5:30 a.m, the police knocked on his parents' front door and gave them the shocking news that Dan was unconscious in intensive care and fighting for his life. The staff did everything they could to save Dan's life, but at 12:50 on Monday the 20th of January, Dan died, surrounded by his family. Dan's family set up the Daniel Spargo Mabs Foundation to ensure that no harm happens to another young person through drugs or alcohol, and that all other young people get to go home safely. One of the projects commissioned by the foundation was that of a new play written by renowned playwright Mark Wheeler, which tells Dan's story using the words of his family and friends. This short film documents the journey of the play, from the page to the stage and beyond.
Soon after Dan died, to be honest, we thought we need to do something to warn other people. And it was when the reporters started knocking the next day, first thing in the morning after we got the day after he died, and there was this kind of complete chaos. I mean, it was just awful. Anyway, we're still just in complete numb shock. And these reporters and photographers kept knocking on the door, and we got to the point where we thought, no, we want to talk to them. We want to say Dan wasn't. There were headlines saying ecstasy teen dies at illegal rave. We kind of wanted to say that wasn't who Dan was. We wanted to say he wasn't that. Don't judge him by this one thing. This is who he was. But as we started talking, we thought, but we need to. This has got Dan. We hadn't realised this was quite so close to our door, and we need to warn other people. So it came from just talking to the press. They came and asked. They wanted us to talk, and so we did, and that's what we wanted to say.
In those intervening few months before we turned to drama, our first thoughts, if I remember correctly, were about empowering young people to tell other young people about the risks they face, because I think I realised fairly early on that I didn't have a divine right to be listened to by people a third of my age. We didn't act on that first. In the way it sort of all got snowballed, the play came along and the lesson plans and the schoolwork developed. But one of the very first thoughts was what turned out to become the youth ambassadors.
But actually, I hadn't thought till you just said that. What's amazing about the play is that it is young people talking to young people, which wasn't the part of the plan. But I mean, it's old people like us too. But it is it's young people's voices for lots of the play, isn't it?
So we kind of got there by two routes. The second one without consciously trying.
Yeah, the play was never part of the plan, but it's ended up being an incredible core part of what we're doing. The play idea didn't come up for a couple of months, which is still ridiculously early, but that was from a playwright who contacted us, this Spanish playwright in Barcelona who'd already started writing a play about Dan. It was the most bizarre thing.
Yeah.
And again, I mean, all these odd, such a surreal life that we'd been thrown into, that somebody in Barcelona had read about Dan and wanted to write a play about him. And he was over in London and we met him for coffee and he talked about it, and it was, he'd already made decisions about how our family worked and what Dan was like, and then he wanted to get information from the police and the consultant and his friends, and it just all started to feel a bit scary. So I had a chat to Izzy Forrester, Dan's drama teacher, just because we were meeting for a cup of tea anyway. I don't know what to do. There's this playwright who wants to write this play about Dan, and he's wanting all this information, and it's not right, and he's doing it anyway. And then she said, well, had you thought about drama as a way of communicating with young people? And I have to confess that we hadn't.
No.
Much as Dan loved drama, we're not really drama kind of theatre sort of people at all. And she suggested Mark Wheeler because she loves Mark Wheeler and she's taught his plays for years and years and knows that he writes so powerfully for young people. Would we mind if she contacted him on his website? And so we said, no, that's fine, go ahead.
I first became involved in I Love You Mum as a result of an email I had completely out of the blue from who I later discovered was Dan's drama teacher, Izzy Forrester. She'd had a conversation with Fiona where Fiona was looking for someone to create a play based on the sequence of events that led to Dan's passing. And she asked Izzy whether she knew anyone, and Izzy, with Dan's class, had actually been looking at another play of mine, Legal Weapon, and she suggested my name, and so I had an email, as I say, completely out of the blue.
And I spoke to Mark a lot on the phone initially, and obviously Izzy trusted him and I trust Izzy, and I was, well, at the point at which we were making a decision about do we go ahead with this, and which was really early on. A very dear friend of mine had taken me away with her to a hotel for the weekend. I'd forgotten that she used to be an English and drama teacher because she'd been doing youth work for ages, and she'd been covering it. She'd been working up in Hull, been covering a GCSE drama class for the previous couple of years. And when I said Mark Wheeler, she went, "Oh my goodness, Mark Wheeler is just so amazing!" And she'd just been teaching Too Much Punch for Judy for the previous couple of years, and just watching the penny drop with each of these really disaffected students in a very, very deprived part of what is a very deprived part of the country anyway, who ended up failing every single GCSE except drama. And that kind of swung it for me. But nevertheless, I had ever such a lot of jitters, certainly for quite a long time. It kind of felt like handing Dan over for public consumption. And even so latterly. It was very important that the Alice bit of the story was played right, that the balance was right. I didn't want it to be overplayed, but I also didn't want it to be underplayed, and that's really tricky. But it felt then, and it has since, felt a lot like we're kind of saying, look, here you are, here's our son, do what you like with him. And what I've tried to do is think this is part of something that we're doing, is part of a bigger thing, to try and use Dan's story to help other young people to be aware of the risks that they might also be taking. And that's really important, and as part of that, to try and separate Dan in the play from my Dan. So, and hopefully the way the play's been written will be such that it's difficult to play him differently, hopefully.
I by contrast, didn't have any jitters like that at all. There is a saying, ignorance is bliss, and I am very ignorant about the dramatic world. I think my primary emotion was one of joy that the story wasn't being lost or forgotten, that little community of friends in Archbishop Tennyson's school that was around Dan in the years leading up to his death would in some way go on being celebrated. And I think I always knew from quite early on that there was the sort of latitude with Mark, that if I didn't like something, I could tell him.
Yeah,
and I found myself playing catch-up all the time. Watching the rehearsals, I'd just be full of adulation, and they'd be saying, "Oh, that bit didn't work well, but perhaps you could do it like this." And I'd think afterwards, "Oh, yeah, probably right." But no, I was playing catch-up. I was following, and ignorance was bliss. I didn't have any of those jitters at all.
I mean, I have to say, getting to know Mark, which we did fairly quickly, because he's such a nice person, I did trust him, and I trusted his judgment, and if I hadn't done, there's no way I would have done this. And he's been so open and flexible and taken on board everything and wanted to know what we think about everything at every stage, and it's been a very fluid process.
I decided really early on that this needed to be a verbatim play. It was really important to me and to the people who were telling me the story that we got as close to the truth as we possibly could. And I felt that the best way to do that was to use the words of the people who were involved in the situation. I went to do interviews, and it soon became clear. Originally, I was commissioned to do a 50-minute play, and it became very clear to me that it was too much story for 50 minutes unless it was going to be reduced to something I didn't really at that point want it to be. So I decided that there were two distinct stories quite early on, and those two stories separated not only in my mind, but in the way the interviews were conducted. The availability of the young friends of Dan happened to be on one particular day, and the availability of the family was on another day. So we did the interviews separately, and Dan's girlfriend happened to be interviewed on the same day as the mum and dad. And I felt that her story, Jenna's story, fitted with the family far more than the young people, friends, because she wasn't at the rave, and she kind of fitted into his home life more than his, I'll use the word social life. I know she was part of his social life, but she was part of his home life, essentially, and was also part of being at the hospital, which the family were as well. So the decision to split it into two plays, the friends play and the family play, came quite early on. And so I worked towards doing two plays. I have to say I never have a clear idea of how something will look. I just knew it would look good. What I wanted to avoid was, if you look at the script, it looks like lots of lumps of people speaking, and I wanted the play not to look like that. So the process that we went through was basically us having a read through, and then pretty much people guessing where they might stand, how they might move, allowing the script to suggest what they might do, and generating ideas like that. So that put it into 3D. And then we had an ensemble, and I wouldn't often be in the room when those bits were created. So I would disappear, and then I'd be an eye who came back and looked and made contributions at that point. So they had a fresh eye on their creation. But 90% of the time, I was not there for much of the creation. And my role would be one of selecting from the bits that were created and trying to improve on really strong starting points. And the group, who worked together for 18 months, an exceptional commitment, became very good at at working together and using this kind of script. And it's fair to say that before we even started rehearsing for the production, they were using the oral testimony, so the words that the people had spoken in its raw form, and they did some really interesting adaptations of that. So we went back to that and used those ideas as well. The guy who was originally slated in to play Dan and had been doing so for a year was also a boxer, and suddenly his boxing career started to take off, and he realised he'd got to make a choice, either to be involved in the play, or one of the dates of the play or an important rehearsal was some kind of very big boxing match that came up. So he was beginning to have clashes, and he decided, probably about 2 months before we were due to open, he decided he needed to drop out. And I can remember that night, Danny saying to me, "Don't worry, Mark, out of this something really good will come." And I knew exactly what he was saying, because this had happened before. It had happened in Too Much Punch for Judy, it had happened in Hard to Swallow, and out of both of those really good things came. And out of this arose an idea, because we didn't want to introduce someone new to a cast and give this person the kind of plum part. So what should we do? Should we use someone existing? Should we get someone new who might let us down again? No. What we do is share the part amongst lots of different people. And originally we were going to use a scarf, but Dan's mum said a hoodie would be a better idea, and they would put on a hoodie to represent Dan. And it became the iconic feature of the production. When the professional group came to do it, they had a cast of 4. They chose to do it with the hoodie on a coat frame with one arm in, and became almost like a puppet. And I think it is the feature of the play that is one of the most memorable things, and very good for the family, because they said we didn't have to look at one person becoming Dan and we had to believe they were Dan. It kind of meant that there were all sorts of different shadows put on Dan's character, and it ended up being a really, really wonderful idea and development out of adversity.
One of the things that was incredible was when Dan went from being a person playing Dan to being a hoodie.
Yes, that was.
And that was just
graphic.
Such a moving and powerful way of him being there. I mean, it hadn't bothered me at all that, because Harry was so lovely, that there was somebody playing Dan. But it was always going to be difficult, and actually going forward as well in other productions, I'm really pleased that there isn't going to be someone who's trying to be Dan. I trusted Harry to be Dan, but I don't know that I would trust anybody else to play Dan. So and of course that's the whole thing, is that he's absent. It's not it yeah.
The first time we met the cast and the crew will remain in my memory forever as one of the most intense evenings of my life. I hadn't expected this. I was very glad that my brother was driving us there and back, because I would have been a limp rag. It would have been unsafe to drive us home. But that doesn't mean that the experience was negative. I had this funny, strange picture, the only way of describing it. It felt like I was sitting in the room, in the hall, in a circle with them all, and community was growing like a vine between us. And so all that Fiona says is absolutely true on a conscious level, but I was very much aware on a kind of a lower than conscious level. There was masses of energy flowing around, and I guess that's where I probably found my way into the group, and found I had reactions to things and comments, whereas previously I lacked the engagement.
The family wanted to be really involved, and that suited us down to the ground. It was wonderful to have them visiting. It gave us an impetus. What more can you have than the real people coming next Sunday to watch as a motive for our young cast to do outstanding work? And I've always, in all the verbatim work that I've done, found that to be an incredible motivator, and it certainly was in this play. And also then having the friends come, so they came down for a rehearsal to see very near the performance, and I think that was really key for them, because they were able to see what we were doing and how we were doing it, and I think it gave them a sense of relief to know that it was in safe hands. I was insistent that Dan's mum and dad did see it before they were there with the public watching it, so there were no surprises. And I think that was really important.
We just knew that it was in really safe hands, because everyone was just so incredibly lovely, and so we were so bowled away by how committed everybody was to getting Dan right and to getting the story right, and there was such a passion and commitment to the integrity of the whole thing, and these young people who were just so lovely and so moved by the story, and so kind of saw the project as something bigger than just another play.
Like from the outset, we all had this huge connection to Dan, and we all felt like he was one of our best friends, and it wasn't like he lived in Croydon and he was far away. We actually felt like, I actually felt like I was his girlfriend, and I felt like, how would I feel if that actually was what was happening? And everything was so real. It was never like, okay, do this, do that, because that's what they'd do. It was sort of like you knew what to do because you knew Dan.
I got involved in the play first. I just started going to the youth theatre and didn't even really know what they were doing. And then I found out what we were doing, and it seemed really like exciting project to work on. The fact that it was spoken like verbatim, and it just seemed really interesting because it's something that I'd never done before, and it really intrigued me. Once I found out about Dan's story, then it interested me even more, and I wanted to do the family justice. So I wanted to help them out in this journey of making people aware of Dan's story to make sure that it didn't happen to somebody else. When I found out like my character of Connie, it was just words on a page, just characters, the same as characters I had played before that are just kind of make-believe. I knew in my head that they weren't make-believe, they were real, but I didn't see that until we actually met them, and then I could say, hi, I'm Alicia, I'm playing Connie, and they'd say, yeah, I'm Connie, hi. And it's kind of that reality of, you are a real person, now I've got to get you right, I've got to now portray you and make sure I don't do the wrong thing and say the wrong thing and just portray you in a different way to what they are, and also portray Dan in the wrong way and say the wrong thing in a different tone to what it should be. So it's just kind of the worry of doing something wrong now that it's an actual person.
Just talking about it makes it all sound really easy. It isn't doing these things, because you start off with a piece of paper with nothing on it, and then you end up with a piece of paper that is loaded with bulky words, and a group who aren't in any way expert, who develop their expertise with you, working on it. But that offers an enormous freedom. So I didn't at any point put a limitation on what they might create, and they came up with all sorts of things that I, with my experience, might not have thought of. So the collaboration was really a key part of it, and a generating creativity part of it as well. But was it always comfortable? No. Was it always easy? No. Were we thrilled with what we did at times? Yes. We all knew from very early on that we were doing something that was very, very special and we felt would be remembered. But there were times when we really questioned whether we were ever going to get to the point that we believed we should be at.
From going from reading the script, I'd got absolutely no idea how that would translate onto the stage at all. So when we went down the first time, I think all that they prepared, if I'm remembering rightly, was just the beginning bit, which was the rave scene, which of course wasn't even in the script at all. So I just, that was remarkable.
So in creating the rave, it was quite difficult at first because we didn't really know what to do, and it was going for a series of different ideas in which that would work. We also had Tim Ford come up once we had got a bit of a basis of what we were doing, and he gave us the idea of using actual water bottles. So he did a couple of exercises with us to try and walk around with a load of open water bottles full up with water to try and experiment what would work and what wouldn't. And we used elements of the water bottles in it to show like the drugs and how like nasty the drugs were to Dan. But the process of it, making it right, was a long process. I think it's the part that took the longest, but the part that mattered the most.
I remember they wanted it to be really well choreographed, but they wanted it to be like, it looked like we didn't know what we were doing, so it looked like we were in that environment. So we had a very significant part is when we get hold of the boy who was playing Dan at the time, Ollie, and we were flinging him about back and forth, and an original idea was we were going to flip him, which not sure if we did use, but we're going to do a couple flips, catch him, and then throw him out. And I remember that went quite wrong one day, and we were like, well, we've got to change that and make it look different. So it was a really long process, and we spent 3, 4, maybe 5 onwards rehearsals working on just that bit. And I think that if you ask anyone who watched the play, they'd say that was a significant moment in the play.
The highlights were, to be honest, it was filled with highlights. It was wonderful when Dan's mum and dad first came to see it. It was wonderful at the first performance we did at Oasis Academy, where we'd actually managed to do it, and the reaction was absolutely stunning. Another amazing thing was the read-through. It's the only read-through I've ever had where people break down in tears. That to me was a really amazing sign that something is very special about this. And then of course there was the Brit School, which was the official premiere in Croydon near to Dan's home, and that was a memorable venue for us to perform, where all these celebrities that we knew of had their education, and all these celebrities in waiting came to watch it, along with a guest of dignitaries. And then the news that it was going to be performed professionally, the news that it was to be published by Methuen, which was the first time one of my plays had been published by that amazing company. So yeah, there were lots of highlights.
Lives that Dan has touched, and he's not even met anybody. He's not met any of us, and he's just such a massive part of our lives now. And our family and our friends have got to know Dan through us, so they've passed us his story, and we've passed it on. And he's just touched so many people, and he unfortunately wasn't here to actually do that himself.
I think the biggest message isn't the consequence of drugs; it's the consequence of losing someone. And no matter how you lose them, it does affect people, whether that's through natural causes or something like these actions through drugs, or it's anything, isn't it? And I think it's that showing how each single life is precious, and how you need to do these preventions and look at the consequences of what your actions might do to
other people.
Yeah, to get it away from it. Because I think this whole play isn't about what Dan did and how the outcome was. I think it's the effect it has on everyone else. Like I said, it's verbatim style, so it's based on real words, so you can't ask what Dan did and his own account of it. It's what other people, so it is basically the effect it's had on everyone else rather than a story, if that makes sense.
It became one big joke. There was this whole quality of intonation thing. I'd give him a big sort of dramatic hug and I'd say, "I love you, Dan." And he'd go,
"I love you, Mum. I promise I won't die."
I remember one of the first things I said when I got to the hospital was, "You promised, Dan. You promised."
Well, I just really hope that it that it makes a difference to the way that young people see the decisions that they make about drugs. And the consequences that there might be, and that they're able to, through drama, they're able to identify with Dan and with his friends and with his parents and with all the people that were affected by this one decision. I think you can do that through drama in a way that it's harder to do through other medium, maybe. But that's what we really hope, and what we ultimately hope is that anybody that hears about this will think twice and three times and just not make the same mistake. It's learning from Dan's mistake, really.
If in the medium term we can equip parents and young people with information and help them to stay safe, that's great. And in the very long term, maybe this will be a part of the toolkit that changes government policy, that puts serious resources into equipping young people to live in the world that will confront them across the board. If we can play our part in that, and if the play can promote that, I guess we'll have done all that we're aware of that we can at the moment.